Yusuf Abramjee and Andrew Stoller join us for more discussion of drug-related crimes in the country. Let's start with you, Andrew, also in Cape Town there. Is the MEC right that Cape Town has this particular, or the Western Cape, a particular vulnerability to drug-related crime?
I believe we do. I believe that the actual extent of the problem is greater than in other cities and provinces around the country.
And why is that? I mean, what is it about Cape Town? There must be an historic reason. The MEC talked about research into the issue. What do we know about this?
Generally, the fact that we're a port city and there is easy access to our borders and coastline, I believe, is part of the problem.
Yusuf, back in Johannesburg here, you've been involved heavily with 702, with Lead SA, Crime Line and so on, and yet things like drug-related crimes seem intractable. I mean, whatever people do. Are your initiatives making a difference? Because you have to talk to the cops, you have to talk to the community groups. What are you seeing?
Well, I think we are making some inroads, but there's a long road ahead. There's no doubt, David, that drugs do contribute substantially to the incidence of crime, be it rape, be it murder, and even in robberies and house robberies, many of the criminals are high on drugs. I'm convinced that the hijackers of the little boy in Reiger Park were high on drugs. No normal person, in my view, would have committed that gruesome crime.
Even a criminal.
Even a criminal would have done that gruesome crime and dragged that boy for a kilometer or two in a normal state of mind. The findings and the experiences that we are having is that the drug problem is not only prone to the Western Cape, although it might be higher in the Western Cape. Every corner of South Africa has a drug problem. Whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're young, whether you're old, whether you're black, whether you're white, the narcotics problem is most certainly having a major impact on communities. I go to school very regularly, and I ask the kids, you know, without putting the cameras, without taking your photographs, put up your hand and tell us honestly who's on drugs, and you are shocked at the number of hands that go up. Kids as young as 8 and 9 are now confessing that they are high on drugs, and that's a major problem. And I think the big challenge for the authorities, specifically the South African Police Service, is how do we tackle the drug problem in South Africa? Police are making many arrests, and you know, no sense targeting the little guy down the corner selling a little so-called Zol, for example. Yeah. We need to have focus on the drug traffickers, the drug dealers, the big guys, the manufacturers, because someone, somewhere, somehow, he has some information about who's selling drugs, who's manufacturing drugs, and those are the people we need to target, the organized crime syndicates. Dan Plato said it, the Western Cape, the gang warfare. A lot of the gang warfare that we are seeing, not only in the Western Cape, even in areas like Reiger Park, Eldorado Park, Annandale, Westdene, is related around the control of the drug trade. So most certainly a big problem, David.
Andrew, perhaps let's come back to you in Cape Town. Who's responsible for this? Because you mentioned Cape Town being in close proximity to the ports. Who's responsible for bringing these drugs into South Africa?
It's very much organized crime syndicates, and since we have become the new democracy that we are, our borders opened up considerably more than they were, and this has allowed new entrants into the marketplace for the drugs. We believe that the way to actually help towards tackling this problem at the moment is to actually look at how we can reduce the demand by working with the actual users themselves, by looking at some of the softer issues that are involved along the lines of the legacy of our past and the fact that the experience of trauma through violent crime is experienced in some of our poorer areas is a way for us to be able to reduce the demand and therefore possibly start looking at denting into the supply side of things.
Yusuf, in a sense, none of this is new. I mean, it's been known for 30, 40 years that you need to get the Mr. Big behind the pushers on the street. The cops have learnt many lessons and perhaps forgotten many lessons over the years. One of the mistakes in South Africa was to disband the specialist drug and other units, but in this case, the narcotics unit, so where specialist expertise, knowledge of the underworld was dispersed.
I've said it publicly, David, I'll say it again. One of the biggest mistakes the police ever made is to close the specialized units like the narcotic units. I don't think the ordinary cop who's patrolling the street knows the difference between a Panado and a Mandrax tablet. I don't think he'll know the difference between sugar and cocaine, for that matter. And I think that is a problem that we're having, is that the arrests are being made. And yes, I think we need to praise the police for making a lot of arrests, but there needs to be a multifaceted approach to fighting the drug problem. Many of the drug dealers go to courts, they get easy bail, they walk the streets within hours. We've seen it in El Dorado Park, where many of the drug dealers have been arrested, and within hours they are out. Whether they go back to court to face prosecution, I think doesn't really happen. And I think it's a major problem. Corruption does play a role. So I think the criminal justice system, specifically our court system, needs to be jacked up. We need stricter punishment. We need to make sure that these people are prosecuted. And I think we need to put the whole drug problem, David, to me, onto the national agenda, if not the international agenda. That is why we at Crime Line, we're partnering with Crime Stoppers International, with the South African Police Service, and we're hosting, for the first time on the African continent, an international conference in Cape Town from the 12th to the 15th of October. We have the Western Cape Provincial Government on board, we have Helen Zille on board, we have the police service on board, and we really need to sit down and see what needs to be done to tackle this drug scourge. As much as we talk, I think the time has now come for action, but the court system is something which is really very, very worrying.
Perhaps we can come back to you in Cape Town. We've been hearing about a multi-faceted approach from Yusuf. We've got the Crime Line. Again, he's saying that there will be a conference that will be taking place to look at an approach. At the moment now, what are the options for a person who perhaps has knowledge of cartels or syndicates? What can they do and still maintain their anonymity?
That's a real tough one. There is a huge problem around the threat to security for the individuals themselves. And within the communities that we're working with here in Cape Town, a lot of the dealers being at the street level are actually sons and daughters of people who live in the community. So there is a fair amount of protection that happens for the dealers themselves. And there is a very severe threat to people who will be able to come forward and whistleblow in that sort of extent. So protection would need to be happen to be able to secure that sort of information.
Yep. Yusuf, one of the aspects you mentioned, the specialist crime units, there are lots of crimes in South Africa. I don't know if the drug area is unique in the sense that it goes, as you said, it goes across all classes. So much of the crimes that we see are, shall we say, the criminal classes. Drug use is throughout. You've got wealthy people in the area around where CNBC studios are, rich businessmen who openly take drugs.
Indeed, it's a big problem. Let me first of all respond to Andrew. I think the question of being anonymous is critical. That is why we at Crime Line, Crime Stop, our partners in the police service, we make sure and we give the guarantee that every tip-off is anonymous. So if you dial 08600 10111, we don't want your name, we don't want your number, don't give your name, don't give your number. Your calls are not recorded. Make sure that you pass on the information about the syndicates to the police, or you can SMS 32211. The network deletes your number, we don't need your name. And I think that is going to be key to fighting the drug scourge. But yes, coming back to your issue, David, this drug problem is widespread. And I think the quicker we as civil society get up, the quicker the authorities get their act together, the quicker we'll be able to make a difference. I know there's a debate raging about the legalization of drugs. Should it become legal? It's a separate debate that we have. All we need to focus on now is the facts and the reality. Drugs are ruining communities. Drugs are ruining lives. Business people are affected. And you know, you talk of CEOs. You talk of big people within the business community. And I admire for those that come out publicly and say, I have a problem and I need help. You know how many calls we get by the month of people saying, give us a name of a good rehab. And you really feel sorry for anyone that comes forward, because these drug dealers, all they want from the victims is their hard-earned cash. And they really operate in cities, in towns, in dark corners, in broad daylight for that matter. And we really need to say enough is enough and really unite in the fight against crime. And that is why I say it again, especially to the JSE listed companies, to the big corporates. We need to invest money in education. We need to invest money in all other charities. But if we don't invest money in the fight against crime and fighting organized crime, we are going to lose this battle. And that is why, you know, companies lose millions and millions of rands, David, as a result of crime. We're now seeing shopping malls being attacked, right? And yet many companies are saying they are reluctant to invest money in the fight against crime. Maybe it's not sexy enough. That is why I appeal on this very important platform of CNBC Africa to our business leaders to say, really, put your money where your mouth is. Invest your money in the fight against crime. I know we won't give money to the police because we know a lot of the money goes wasted. But really, private initiatives, that are really making a difference, and we believe in civil society that we will be able to make a difference if we all work together.
Thank you so much. That was Yusuf Abramjee, who's the head of Crime Line, and Andrew Stoller, who is joining us from Cape Town, who's the Coastal Director of the Anti-Drug Alliance in South Africa.